Welcome back to A Year of War and Peace, the podcast where we go from War and Peace 0 to Hemingway Hero 0. Oh, I've messed it up. Look, I'm working on a new slogan because, as you all would probably know by now, this podcast will soon be known as the Hemingway List, not A Year of War and Peace. Because the year is nearly up and we need something to continue on to. So the Hemingway List it is. So I think the last update I gave you guys about the new subreddit, the Hemingway List subreddit, we had something like 80 subscribers or 60 subscribers or something like that. Overnight last night, I mentioned the subreddit on a Ask Reddit forum, and that forum blew up massively. It became on the front page of Reddit. And so my little mention of A Year of War and Peace and subsequently the Hemingway List went berserk. Absolutely berserk. The A Year of War and Peace subreddit went from about 2,000 subscribers to over 5,000 subscribers just overnight. And the Hemingway List subreddit went from less than 100 subscribers, I think it was at about 80, to 1,500 subscribers. Can you believe that? I don't think they'd be listening now. Some of them might have found their way here. If you have, you're listening to like the 350th chapter of War and Peace today. But regardless, welcome. Welcome into the fold. Now, I'm not sure what to expect when we move into the new year after we finish War and Peace. But I would love for all of those who are listening and who have been listening all year, just to know that, I'll still be here. Every day I'll still be on the mic. I'll have some new books to read. It's all good literature. So, I don't really have to say this, but you are more than welcome to continue this journey down the Hemingway List path with us. Of course, I also must say, if you're not that interested in the Hemingway List and you just wanted to hear War and Peace, that's cool too. It's fair enough. Like, this Hemingway List thing is going to take us years to accomplish, years. So I completely understand if you're not up for that. The cool thing about it, though, is it will be separated into pretty small chunks. War and Peace is by far the biggest, longest book on the list. And a lot of the other ones are much, much shorter. So you could isolate out those episodes and listen along or do whatever you want. Anyway, my point is, welcome to the new people, to the original gangsters of War and Peace. I would love for you to continue this journey with me. Otherwise, it has been a pleasure serving you. Let's get on with the reading. Today's chapter is Epilogue 1, Chapter 9. It was the eve of St. Nicholas, the 5th of December, 1820. Natasha had been staying at her brother's with her husband and children since early autumn. Pierre had gone to Petersburg on business of his own for 3 weeks, as he said, but had remained there nearly 7 weeks and was expected back every minute. Besides the Bezikov family, Nicholas's old friend, the retired General Vasily Dmitrich Denisov, was staying with the Rostovs this 5th of December. Denisov's here. On the 6th, which was his name day, when the house would be full of visitors, Nicholas knew he would have to exchange his Tartar tunic for a tailcoat and put on narrow boots with pointed toes and drive to the new church he had built, and then receive visitors who would come to congratulate him, offer them refreshments, and talk about the elections of the nobility. The footnote says the nobility, or rather the gentry, of each province formed a corporation with periodical elections and assemblies, and played at that period an almost exclusive part in local administration. But he considered himself entitled to spend the eve of that day in his usual way, He examined the bailiff's accounts of the village of Ryazan, which belonged to his wife's nephew, wrote 2 business letters, and walked over to the granaries and cattle yards and the stables before dinner. Having taken precautions against the general drunkenness to be expected on the morrow, because it was a great saint's day, he returned to dinner, and without having time for a private talk with his wife, sat down to the long table laid for 20 persons, at which the whole household had assembled. At that table were his mother, his mother's old lady companion Belova, his wife, their 3 children and their governess and tutor, his wife's nephew with his tutor, Sonia, Denisov, Natasha, her 3 children, their governess, and old Michael Ivanovich, the late prince's architect, who was living in retirement at Bald Hills. Countess Mary sat at the other end of the table. When her husband took his place, she concluded, from the rapid manner in which, after taking up his table napkin, he pushed back the tumbler and wine-glass standing before him, that he was out of humour, and was sometimes the case when he came into dinner straight from the farm, especially before the soup. Countess Mary knew that mood of his well, and when she herself was in a good frame of mind, quietly waited till he had had his soup, and then began to talk to him and make him admit that there was no cause for his ill humour. But today she quite forgot that, and was hurt that he should be angry with her without any reason, and she felt unhappy. She asked him where he had been. He replied. She again inquired whether everything was going well on the farm. Her unnatural tone made him wince unpleasantly, and he replied hastily. Then I'm not mistaken, thought Countess Mary. Why is he cross with me? She concluded from his tone that he was vexed with her and wished to end the conversation. She knew her remarks sounded unnatural, but could not refrain from asking some more questions. Thanks to Denisov, the conversation at table soon became general and lively, and she did not talk to her husband. When they left the table and went, as usual, to thank the old countess, the footnote says it was customary in Russia to thank the hostess after dinner, and in this case the old countess, though she was not the hostess, was thanked out of deference. Countess Mary held out her hand and kissed her husband, and asked him why he was angry with her. You always have such strange fancies. I didn't even think of being angry, he replied. But the word always seemed to her to imply, yes, I am angry, but I won't tell you why. Nicholas and his wife lived together so happily that even Sonia and the old countess, who felt jealous and would have liked them to disagree, could find nothing to reproach them with. But even they had their moments of antagonism. Occasionally, and it was always just after they had been happiest together, they suddenly had a feeling of estrangement and hostility, which occurred most frequently during Countess Mary's pregnancies, and this was such a time. Well, Monsieur et Mesdames, said Nicholas loudly and with apparent cheerfulness. It seemed to Countess Mary that he did it on purpose to vex her. I have been on my feet since 6 this morning. Tomorrow I shall have to suffer, so today I'll go and rest. And without a word to his wife, he went to the little sitting room and lay down on the sofa. That's always the way, thought Countess Mary. He talks to everyone except me. I see that I am repulsive to him, especially when I am in this condition. She looked down at her expanded figure, and in the glass at her pale, sallow, emaciated face, in which her eyes now looked larger than ever. And everything annoyed her, Denisov's shouting and laughter, Natasha's talk, and especially a quick glance Sonia gave her. Sonia was always the first excuse Countess Mary found for feeling irritated. Having sat a while with her visitors, without understanding anything of what they were saying, she softly left the room, and went to the nursery. The children were playing at going to Moscow in a carriage made of chairs, and invited her to go with them. She sat down and played with him a little, but the thought of her husband and his unreasonable crossness worried her. She got up and, walking on tiptoe with difficulty, went to the small sitting room. Perhaps he is not asleep. I'll have an explanation with him, she said to herself. Little Andrew, her eldest boy, imitating his mother, followed her on tiptoe. She did not notice him. Mary, dear, I think he is asleep. He was so tired, said Sonia, meeting her in the large sitting room. It seemed to Countess Mary that she crossed her path everywhere. Andrew may wake him. Countess Mary looked around, saw little Andrew following her, felt that Sonia was right, and for that very reason flushed, and with evident difficulty refrained from saying something harsh. She made no reply, but, to avoid obeying Sonia, beckoned to Andrew to follow her quietly and went to the door. Sonia went away by another door. From the room in which Nicholas was sleeping came the sound of his even breathing, every slightest tone of which was familiar to his wife. As she listened to it, she saw before her his smooth, handsome forehead, his moustache, and his whole face, as she had so often seen it in the stillness of the night when he slept. Nicholas suddenly moved and cleared his throat, and at that moment little Andrew shouted from outside the door, "Papa, Mamma's standing here." Countess Mary turned pale with fright and made signs to the boy. He grew silent, and quiet ensued for a moment, terrible to the Countess Mary. She knew how Nicholas disliked being waked. Then through the door she heard Nicholas clearing his throat again and stirring, and his voice said crossly, "I can't get a moment's peace. Mary, is that you? Why did you bring him here?" "I only came in to look, and did not notice. Forgive me." Nicholas coughed and said no more. Countess Mary moved away from the door and took the boy back to the nursery. 5 minutes later, little black-eyed 3-year-old Natasha, her father's pet, having learnt from her brother that Papa was asleep and Mamma was in the sitting room, ran to her father, unobserved by her mother. The dark-eyed little girl boldly opened the creaking door, went up to the sofa with energetic steps and of her sturdy little legs, and having examined the position of her father, who was asleep with his back to her, rose on tiptoe and kissed the hand which lay under his head. Nicholas turned with a tender smile on his face. "Natasha, Natasha!" came Countess Mary's frightened whisper from the door. "Papa wants to sleep." "No, Mamma, he doesn't want to sleep," said little Natasha with conviction. "He's laughing." Nicholas lowered his legs, rose, and took his daughter in his arms. "Come in, Mary," he said to his wife. She went in and sat down by her husband. "I did not notice him following me," she said timidly. "I just looked in." Holding his little girl with one arm, Nicholas glanced at his wife, and seeing her guilty expression, put his arm around her and kissed her hair. "May I kiss Mamma?" he asked Natasha. Natasha smiled bashfully. "Again," she commanded, pointing with a peremptory gesture to the spot where Nicholas had placed the kiss. "I don't know why you think I am cross," said Nicholas, replying to the question he knew was in his wife's mind. "You have no idea how unhappy, how lonely I feel when you are like that. It always seems to me—" "Mary, don't talk nonsense. You ought to be ashamed of yourself," he said gaily. "It seems to me that you can't love me, that I am so plain, always, and now, and in this condition. Oh, how absurd you are! It is not beauty that endears its love that makes us see beauty. It is only Malvinas and women of that kind who are loved for their beauty. But do I love my wife? I don't love her. But I don't know how to put it. Without you, or when something comes between us like this, I seem lost and can't do anything. Now do I love my finger? I don't love it, but just try to cut it off. I am not like that myself, but I understand. So you're not angry with me?" "Awfully angry," he said, smiling and getting up, and smoothing his hair, he began to pace the room. Do you know, Mary, what I've been thinking? He began, immediately thinking aloud in his wife's presence, now that they had made it up. He did not ask if she was ready to listen to him. He did not care. A thought had occurred to him, and so it belonged to her also, and he told her of his intention to persuade Pierre to stay with them till spring. Countess Mary listened till he had finished, made some remark, and in her turn began thinking aloud. Her thoughts were about the children. You can see the woman in her already, she said in French, pointing to little Natasha. You reproach us women with being illogical. Here is our logic. I say, Papa wants to sleep, but she says no, he's laughing. And she was right, said Countess Mary with a happy smile. Yes, yes. And Nicholas, taking his little daughter in his strong hand, lifted her high, placed her on his shoulder, held her by the legs, and paced the room with her. There was an expression of carefree happiness on the faces of both father and daughter. But you know, you may be unfair. You are too fond of this one, his wife whispered in French. Yes, but what am I to do? I try not to show. At that moment they heard the sound of the door pulley and footsteps in the hall and anteroom, as if someone had arrived. Somebody has come. I am sure it is Pierre. I will go and see, said Countess Mary, and left the room. In her absence, Nicholas allowed himself to go to give his little daughter a gallop round the room. Out of breath, he took the laughing child quickly from his shoulder and pressed her to his heart. His capers reminded him of dancing. And looking at the child's round, happy little face, he thought of what she would be like when he was an old man, taking her into society and dancing the mazurka with her as his old father had danced Daniel Cooper with his daughter. It's he, Nicholas, said Countess Mary, re-entering the room a few minutes later. Now our Natasha has come to life. You should have seen her ecstasy, and how he caught it for having stayed away so long. Well, come along now, quick, it's time you two were parted, she added, looking smilingly at the little girl who clung to her father. Nicholas went out, holding the child by the hand. Countess Mary remained in the sitting room. I should never have believed that one could be so happy, she whispered to herself. A smile lit up her face, but at the same time she sighed, and her deep eyes expressed a quiet sadness, as though she felt through her happiness that there is another sort of happiness unattainable in this life, and of which she involuntarily thought at that instant. All right, there we go, another chapter down. I think that unattainable sort of happiness, just a gut feeling, my immediate response, is going to be the type of love that she sees between Pierre and Natasha. That's my guess. Because Nicholas just said to her that he doesn't love her. She's like a finger to him. You are like a finger to me. I would be dreadfully sad if I lost you. So that's my guess. And I'm really excited that Pierre has just gotten back from 7 weeks away, reunited with his wife Natasha, and we're about to see, I think, in the coming chapter or so, how their marriage is getting on. I'm excited to see that. First, I am going to do an advertisement. This podcast is powered by Podbean. How does that sound? Powered by. They are the magicians who are delivering this experience to your ears. Podbean.com/Ander. Podbean.com/Ander is the place where you can go to get a 1 month free subscription to Podbean. Or sorry, I should say you get your first month for free when you subscribe to Podbean. So what I'm talking about here is if you want to have your own podcast and you're looking for a place to host it, Podbean's a good place to do it. If you decide to sign up and host your podcast over Podbean, use my promo code. That was the worst advertisement ever. But I think you get the picture. If you're thinking about starting podcasting, Podbean are really good. Get the first month for free by using podbean.com/Ander. Okay, Thank you for your patience. On with the show. Well, hey, sometimes when I get like nice comments, I'll read them on the podcast. Like if someone says, hey, I've been listening to the show, it looks really good, or whatever, that kind of thing. I'll read them out, but there have been so many since the last 24 hours that would just be impossible. There were hundreds of them because I posted on that Ask Reddit question about a year of War and Peace and saying this was the best thing I did in 2018. Daily reading of War and Peace, hanging out with my online buddies, discussing literature. And like that comment alone got like 5,500 upvotes. And just hundreds of comments of people saying, this sounds great, sign me up for next year, I want to do it in 2019. So there was a massive and overwhelming amount of positivity around a year of War and Peace in the last 24 hours. I'll just leave it at that. It's actually really exciting because even though I'm moving on to do something other than War and Peace next year, the A Year of War and Peace subreddit will start again in January. Start from chapter 1 again, and it will be bigger next year because we had 2,000 subscribers all year, and as of right now they're at 5,471 subscribers. So they've gone up by over 3,000 subscribers in the last 24 hours, and all those people are just like it's exactly like a year ago in late December last year. We were all getting ready and showing off our copies of the book, taking photos of which translation we've got and having all these like conversations to get the ball rolling. It was really like, it's cool to see that happening again. So I don't know, I just think that's brilliant. I'm really excited. Chattelvelster has said, in this chapter we travel 6 years into the future from the last time we saw Nikolai and Maya. Is that right? Did we really? In this chapter we jump forward that far. They and Pierre and Natasha have all gotten children and have grown up a lot. Did you see them in your imagination as older or still the same age as 6 years ago? Well, I saw them older. To be honest, because the last few chapters Nikolai has just seemed to be aging rapidly. And also, I never saw Maya as a young lady for some reason. I think it was just her demeanor was so serious and sort of, I was going to say stern, but she's not stern. Serious and kind of severe in some ways, right? She doesn't have a, you don't associate the words like sense of humor with Maya. And so I don't know, I didn't see them as young in this chapter. I saw them as like, Papa Nikolai. And I thought it was really quite cute that he got on so well with his little, I think it was 3-year-old Natasha. I just thought that was brilliant. But also Tolstoy style, it's bittersweet because it's so great to see the father and daughter getting along so well, and that, the daughter is sort of the only person in the house that can put a smile on his face. But at the same time, the bitterness is that it's clear to Maya that Natasha is his favourite of their children, which is not a great thing because he's making it too obvious to their little boy that he prefers his little girl, which is, parents should never sort of play favourites, I suppose. It's so funny when you talk to parents, it's like, do you have a favourite? And they're like, no, of course we don't. We love them all equally. But this one, definitely. But no. Right? It's just the way it goes down, I suppose. Chattelvelster also said, even though Maya knows how to deal with Nikolai's temper, now and then it troubles her a lot. When her father was upset with her, she always accepted it without question and didn't even see a reason why she could judge him. What has changed for Maya that she stands up for herself now? That's a good point, Chattelvelster. She got pushed around so much by her father that you would think that she's sort of been conditioned from a very young age to just be bossed around by the man of the house, so to speak. As awful as that sounds, but you'd think that she would just accept it after a whole life of that happening from her father. So what has changed for her that she now stands up for herself? I actually don't have an answer, but it's a great question. Chatterwelster asked, finally, reading the last sentence of this chapter, which happiness is Maya talking about that is unattainable for her in this life? I already gave you my answer, but I'll quickly go over it again. I think we're going to see that Pierre and Natasha are really happy together, and that she wishes she had that. She's happy that she's got this thing, right? A strong family unit. Nikolai won't ever leave her, right? She is like a finger to him, right? In his own words. You're not just going to chop off a finger. So she's got her kids, she's got her house, she's got a functioning thing going on, and she has love for her husband, even if he doesn't seem to have love for her in return. But she's seeing these newlyweds, Pierre and Natasha, even though they've been married for longer than Maya and Nikolai, if I'm not mistaken. And she's envious. That's my guess. I could be wrong, because I have no idea how Pierre and Natasha are getting along. Maybe they despise each other. Maybe everything fell apart. Maybe they're the worst couple ever. I don't know, but I'm really, really excited to see. That's my guess. Biscuit Potter said, I'm pretty sure Maya's thinking Christian thoughts, as per usual. This life isn't the real point. Heaven is. You think that's it? So she's thinking, just got to get through life, be a good Christian girl, and get into heaven. Maybe that's it. We haven't heard much of her religious side for a while, have we? I wonder if she's still taking the pilgrims that were going through Bald Hills. I wonder if that's still a thing. Probably not. That probably stopped with the war. But she was very charitable and generous, wasn't she? I'm sure she still is. I like Maya. I like Pierre and Natasha. Nikolai not so much, although I do like his new little daughter, Natasha, as well. I just see her like coming up in the shadow of her aunt, Natasha. The bubbly, giggly one that puts a smile on your face. And, oh yeah, well, how can I forget this? Denisov's in the house, the exact guy that we're hoping will hook up with Sonia. I felt bad again for Sonia in this chapter, like she's going around the house, just trying to, put in the minimal input. Like she mentioned to Maya, Nikolai's asleep, maybe little Andre shouldn't go in the room. I also thought that was sweet that Nikolai's son was named for Andre. And she's right. She's just pointing out something that's right. But Maya is annoyed by the fact that she's right. And so she rejects her advice just because she doesn't want Sonia to be right about something. So all this is to say that Sonia's just in an uncomfortable position. Even when you're trying to say the right thing, it's annoying to people. Because you're so right all the time. God, you're annoying. Right? She can't win, really. Sonia's in a position where she can't win. She's just literally just trying to lay low, and she's still bugging people. So, Sonia, my final wish for this novel is for Sonia to get a happily ever after. Alright, this has been a long podcast today. I suppose I had a lot to say about these characters. Thank you very much for listening, and I'll see you tomorrow.